Welcome to Parliamentary Talk, the show that brings life to the parliamentary rules of democracy. My name is Larry Taylor.
And my name is Keri Capen.
And our producer, John Ellis, is the ethereal voice you'll hear in the distance.
Hey,
Keri,
Keri.
what is parliamentary procedure and what is a parliamentarian?
So normally when I tell people that I'm a parliamentarian, I'm regarded with blank looks. But I think most people are actually more familiar with parliamentary procedure than they think they are. You might have been exposed, like I was, to parliamentary procedure in high school with student government or college. If you've ever been to a city council meeting or watched any legislative committee meetings on TV or in person, then they probably use some sort of parliamentary procedure. Most unions, neighborhood, and homeowner associations use them as well. So at its core, parliamentary procedure is about ensuring that the will of the majority is done while protecting the rights of the minority. You have to have rules to run a meeting, and that goes all the way back to the founding of our country.
Parliamentary procedure was, as we know it today, was developed during the 1600s in England, and that's when they developed the concepts such as considering one subject at a time, confinement of details to the merits of the pending motion, and always calling for the negative vote. These concepts were brought to the American colonies when they were chartered. In 1787, when we had the Constitutional Convention, after they had a quorum of delegates attending in Philadelphia, the first item on their agenda was to agree upon the rules by which they would operate the convention. And this is how delegates from 13 colonies were able to come up with the framework that is our Constitution today. So how do these rules apply now, Keri?
So most organizations that have bylaws have also adopted a parliamentary authority, such as Robert's Rules of Order, which is what we primarily work with. This includes unions, clubs, fraternal organizations, and neighborhood associations, which is what we're going to talk about today. I'm sure that everyone has sat through a poorly run meeting. It's the most painful thing. It's one of the reasons I became a parliamentarian. Those meetings where nothing seems to get done, where no one knows what's going on, and the most vocal people in the room simply get their way, that can all be prevented by using parliamentary procedure. The rules in parliamentary procedure protect and empower the members in an organization. And in the case of today's incident, excluding and disempowering members might even have had legal implications.
Neighborhood associations are one place where citizens might encounter parliamentary procedure. Neighborhood associations are where people own homes or businesses, and they find themselves in an organization which could actually have fiscal impacts on their personal lives. Sometimes these organizations forget that they're accountable to the membership. And in today's situation, we'll be talking about the Mills Neighborhood Association in Southern Oregon with our guest, Jonah Hakason. Welcome, Jonah.
Hi, Keri and Larry. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Jonah. Tell us how you knew that there was a problem.
Well, my wife and I rent a house in Mills. We moved into the neighborhood. I've always wanted to live here. I grew up here in this part of town, in my town, Klamath Falls. That's where it is. And the association represents residents, property owners, businesses in the neighborhood, like you just explained. And they received an award for being the kind of like the best nonprofit of the year by our newspaper. Gives that out every year. And they got it by doing a big cleanup operation and all that. And we were like, oh, okay, it's great. Now we live in Mills. So we started going to the meetings, right? And we didn't know we could tell there were problems, it's a small, it's new, whatever organization. But when we found out that there was a problem was when we found out that the president had been supposedly removed in some meeting that didn't involve the members.
So the board somehow tried to get rid of the president? What happened next?
Well, there was a meeting that was called and to ask the board about the president being removed. The board at the time, refused to give reasons for holding that meeting to do that. And essentially we expressed that we had no confidence in the board, and ultimately the members started resigning, and my wife and I got concerned because we thought that the association was going to stop. It would fail because there would be nobody there.
So
we had no remedy.
So where did you go to for help?
Well, a person that was involved in the organization who owns a rental here, and he's a contractor and stuff, he knew where to go for legal issues. And he went to the Oregon Department of Justice, and he submitted a complaint, and then they got back to us and basically told us what to do to salvage the bank account and to maintain our status on the state level as a nonprofit.
So what'd you do next?
Well, so we had to locate a copy of the bylaws. That was a lot of fun.
They hadn't already given you a copy?
Well, what happened was they told us basically to just, appoint members. The president was still there because of the bylaws before, and so you had temporary members. We were right before we were going to have our annual meeting and election, so we dug up the bylaws, even though they're missing a page for some reason, and then had to start writing new bylaws and hold an election, and treat ourselves like we were supposed to be treated, and that is as a member nonprofit. So we enfranchised the members in the bylaws, and that was kind of our saving grace, to be honest with you.
So to summarize, the Mills Neighborhood Association is a membership organization, but the bylaws sort of ignored the membership. The board attempted to remove the president, but they couldn't do so. Then, for some reason, the board members started resigning. With the help from the Department of Justice, you elected new officers and then adopted new bylaws. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, you're right.
So how have the structural changes to the organization changed the participation in the neighborhood association?
It went up drastically. Our meeting that was after that was our required annual meeting that's required by the state that we had when we were holding elections. We had 30 people or so, maybe more. I had never seen more than like 5 or 6 people at a meeting, and we had like 30 people there, and people seeking offices, wanting to be on the board, people there to vote, people understanding that they're putting their address and their phone number and their name down gave them access to voting was a big deal. That was a big deal for sure. So yeah, and ever since we've had anywhere from, I don't know, maybe a dozen to like 20 people at every meeting.
Excellent. So if you find yourself in an organization and you don't know where to begin to figure out what's going on and how things are supposed to go, start by doing what Jonah did, which is get a copy of the bylaws. Whether they're good or bad, they still are the rules that are supposed to govern the behavior of your group. A well-run organization would give new members a copy of the bylaw right away. And if your leadership can't find the bylaws, like in this instance, that's problematic, to say the least. But for neighborhood associations, there should be a set of bylaws filed with a state organization. So the Secretary of State or the Justice Department should have a copy. So if all else fails, you can get one there.
So leadership often or sometimes forgets that the power is given to them by the membership. So when organizations are first formed, all decision-making belongs to the membership. The bylaws are the vehicle by which the membership allocates power to the committees and to the officers based on the needs of the organization. And the changes to the bylaws need constant monitoring so you don't get things slipped into the bylaws that inadvertently allocates power that you didn't want to be allocated out.
So in the case of the Mills Neighborhood Association, we're going to kind of highlight a couple of problematic areas in their bylaws, and then also talk about, very briefly, some of the good stuff that they wrote into their new bylaws. If you're watching live, please feel free to call in at 503-588-6444, or go to YouTube of the Uphill Media, and you can put in comments in the live chat, and John will relay them to us. So the bylaws that Jonah was provided were missing a page, so that's at least one page, so that's a little bit of a problem. It jumps from Article 5 to Article 7, I think, so who knows what was in Article 6. Hopefully it was good stuff. So the next thing in this instance is the neighborhood association was defined legally as a member nonprofit, but the bylaws only provided for one general meeting, and that's where they elected their officers. And that was the annual meeting in October. And luckily, all of this nonsense with trying to remove the president and all that's happened right before your annual meeting, so you're able to elect your new officers and kind of start over and reboot things, and then replace the old bylaws.
Yes, bylaws changes ordinarily require a 2/3 vote at a properly called meeting with prior notice. So what does this mean? Proper prior notice means that at the prior regular meeting, you were told specifically what the bylaws changes that are being proposed, so you know whether or not how important it is for you to be at the next meeting to vote on them. One thing to remember is that only members can vote, so this is why the language in your bylaws that define who's a member is so critically important, because you don't want to have a bunch of members show up, or people showing up claiming to be members, and you have no way of vetting them. And then ordinarily, bylaws requires a 2/3 vote to change. So it's a very high threshold to change bylaws, which is something that you don't want to have changing all of the time.
Right. So to kind of just highlight a couple of things in the old bylaws, one big problem was they only had one general membership meeting, and then they were supposed to have quarterly board meetings, and those were not properly noticed. They were open to members, but it was unclear whether they could actually vote. They were, quote, encouraged to attend, and all of the business was done there. So you can't really claim that it's a membership-driven organization when the members don't actually get a say.
The bylaws need clear guidance on the articles that refer to the officers, so it should be clearly spelled out how the officers are elected. The bylaws should clearly delineate the duties of the officers, and there should be language in the bylaws about how you remove officers, because sometimes they're not working out and you need to get rid of them. And then it should also define the term of office.
And their old bylaws did do most of those things, but kind of in a screwy manner, and didn't really, it was really unclear how everything works. Maybe it was in that missing a page. A good set of bylaws should also contain basic articles defining the membership, the officers, meetings, committees, the purpose of the organization, because bylaws define how power is given away from the membership. So they exist to protect the members' core rights, which are to attend meetings, make motions, speak in debate, and to vote on those motions. So if you don't have everything all defined, then yeah, you can have random strangers showing up in your meetings and voting on things. So how did the new bylaws do? So Larry?
There should be an article on meetings, and the bylaws should contain when and where the regular meetings occur, how meeting notice is given. One of the pitfalls here is that so many organizations like to give meeting notice by email as opposed to paying for the postage. A lot of times the email goes into your spam folder, and so you can't really call it delivered. So you have to make sure that if you have a requirement for notice, that you're actually getting notice to your meetings from your leadership. Otherwise, you're not really able to attend. The notice should also contain the meeting location, and it should also state the start time of the meeting. And if these are not in the bylaws, then they should be documented in the standing rules of the organization.
And hooray, the new bylaws do contain all of those things, so that's a step in the right direction. Something that should be included in bylaws and is included in these new bylaws is how to amend them. So members should be able to amend their bylaws. It shouldn't be terribly easy. That's why there's a 2/3 threshold. And then, like Larry alluded to earlier, you want to have proper notice. And these new bylaws actually spell out exactly how bylaws changes get before the membership, and that it specifies a 2/3 majority. So they're doing, this is a pretty good job. The only thing that I would maybe recommend that you change in the future is it doesn't clearly delineate prior notice, but that's a minor step because this is a vast improvement over what it was last time in your old bylaws. So.
So Jonah, tell us what benefits you derived from working with a parliamentarian.
Well, apart from the fact that I trust you, Larry, and I've known you from other things, but I think what are the benefits of knowing a parliamentarian is the fact that you have somebody you can call when you run into these problems, because I didn't know exactly what I could do, what I could bring up at a meeting that would cause what happened to happen. I wanted to change, and other people wanted to change. We wanted some honesty. We wanted a democracy. We wanted to be a member-run nonprofit, and I didn't know where to start. And if I hadn't have spent some time in discussion with you about things, I wouldn't have known. And so that's the benefit. Because there's a lot of tools in that toolbox, and I didn't know what they were until I talked to you. So.
I always recommend to people that they should make friends with their parliamentarians in their lives. I know, speaking from personal experience, I get phone calls and emails regularly. I'm involved in a lot of organizations, but I get referred to things just informally to me all the time. And luckily for all of you all, I like talking about parliamentary stuff, and so it's fun for me. But John, did we have any questions online or from the audience?
You know what? Laura did say there was a comment from Oz in chat, and that is, he wants to know if there's a possibility of training higher level political party members on Robert's rules. But this actually brings to a bigger question, and that is, how hard is this to learn if you're dealing with something like a political party? Is there a difference, or are we dealing with the same rules here?
Let me take the first part of it. So, interestingly, one of the counties here in Oregon passed a resolution that requested that all of the party officers take basic training in parliamentary procedure. So one of the things that we've observed this year is that we have officers that don't even know how to preside at a meeting, which is sort of a fundamental requirement for being a presiding officer, maybe.
Right.
If you can certainly suggest to your membership, and if you want to try forcing it, you can pass a resolution. Do you want to talk about how you can be trained and how hard it is to learn?
Yeah. So parliamentary procedure, I think, is always presented as being really arcane and really complicated, and you have to be, an expert and all the things. And I don't think that's actually true. So the vast majority of your general day-to-day business in a meeting is pretty basic. So if you master just the very basics of Robert's rules, that's going to get you by 80% of the time. The rest of the time, when you get into really complex matters or things kind of blow up like they did in Jonah's case, that's when you need some more technical help. But the most of the time, so Robert's Rules of Order is really logical. So you want to deal with motions one at a time. You only talk about one thing at a time. And so, once you've got the underpinning logic and the basics down, you're probably going to be all right. I know here in Oregon, our political party uses Robert's Rules of Order as their parliamentary authority. There are other parliamentary authorities, at the national level, the House and Senate use their own rules. And it's all really similar, but there are some technical details and whatnot. So that's one thing you should find out first, is who is your parliamentary authority. It's usually Roberts. That's the most common one, but not always. So that would be your first step. Did we have any other questions?
No, that pretty much takes care of it right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things, so there's other resources that you can go to for help. Starting just kind of big picture, general level, you can contact the National Association of Parliamentarians, or NAP. My husband likes to joke that that's not a coincidence that the acronym is NAP. Parliamentarians.org is their website, and they have tons and tons of resources and things that, both free and things that you can purchase. They have cue cards and script cards. They have tons of books and courses that you can learn. Another resource here in Oregon is the Oregon Association of Parliamentarians, and that's oregonap.org. And they can put you in contact with units. So these are groups that meet either in person in the Portland metro area or electronically to talk about parliamentary procedure. Most of them run educational courses. The Cascadia unit here in Oregon, we have members from Canada and all over the West that come and ask questions and learn more about the Robert's Rules of Order. And then if you personally want to learn more and kind of learn the ins and outs, you have a couple of books that you can get. First, you can get the full Robert's Rules of Order. I wouldn't recommend it, honestly. It's a terrible book. It's really dense language, very complex language, and it's a struggle to read. So Robert's and it's long. It's 700 and some pages long. But if you're like me and a rules geek, then you like to go and chase down those rabbit trails and find all the exceptions and all of the complicated things. But so Roberts describes a motion as the original main motion is a main motion that introduces a substantive question as a new subject. This is the motion most often used and is the basic device by which a matter is presented to the assembly for possible action. So that's not a simple sentence, and it's buried 100 pages into the book. So it's not always the most helpful thing. So this book that I do recommend is this one, Robert's Rules of Order in Brief. It is brief. It's less than 200 pages. It has sample scripts. It's written in clear, concise, plain English. So this book describes a main motion as, to make a main motion after obtaining the floor, you simply say, I move that, and then describe the proposal. And it gives you actual scripts. It gives you, if you're presiding officer, how you process a motion. And so it's a lot easier to read, and it doesn't go into all the details and whatnot that Larry and I like to look at. So this is the one that I recommend. I actually carry extra copies with me so I can give them away to people. Like, that's how much I recommend this book. Don't read the main version unless you really want to learn all the ins and outs. And then, of course, make friends with parliamentarians. We like this kind of stuff. And then finally, if you find yourself really in a mess, hire a parliamentarian. They've got services that they can provide. And Larry, you want to tell them about that?
Just one more thing on training for a parliamentarian. The National Association of Parliamentarians has a couple of levels of accreditation. So when you join the organization, you have to pass a fairly easy exam to show that you have some kind of proficiency in the subject matter. The next level is to become a registered parliamentarian. And so there's an exam, well, there's a series of exams to take that. They're evolving the training, so it's a little bit more easy to take now.
Relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking. But it really gives you a thorough grounding of the material. So by the time you finish that, you understand what's going on. And then there's the highest level, which is a professional registered parliamentarian. And those are the ones that you want to hire for the really sticky situations. So they have gone through training, some with extremely experienced parliamentarians, so that you have some assurance that you're getting people that know what they're talking about. So if you were to hire a parliamentarian, they could do a number of things for you. They provide a number of services, including you can get them to conduct workshops. Both Keri and I teach parliamentary procedure, and we can talk about any subject matter that you would like into your organization, including how to make simple motions and amendments, which is the fundamental building blocks. Parliamentarians can serve to advise presiding officers at conventions. So the parliamentarian usually sits next to the presiding officer, and then if things are starting to go off course, help correct, just make sure that the rules of democracy are being followed. Parliamentarians can help you review your bylaws to point out any possible areas that need improvement. And then certainly if you're going to amend your bylaws, they can review the amendments to make sure that you're not digging yourself into a situation. They can give guidance if you find yourself in a parliamentary hole. So I had one organization who had their annual meeting. There was a requirement that they elected officers at the annual meeting, but they didn't attain a quorum, and so they want to know what they did next. And so I was able to review their bylaws and figure out a path following the rules by which they could to get themselves out of that situation. And then parliamentarians can act as expert witnesses if you find your organization being subject to a lawsuit.
Just going back really briefly to teaching classes, that's honestly one of my favorite things to do. I have a basic course where we just talk about really basic things like how to make a motion and walk through the script on how you actually do it, because there is a proper way to process a motion. Like a lot of organizations just kind of wing it, and that's cool and all if everybody is in basic agreement, but if you get into really complicated things or contentious things, it is helpful to have that formality and how to process motions. And so that really helps. But I've also given, like Larry said, specialized classes about specific topics because things come up in your organization, and it's helpful to have kind of an overview on things that you can do. And then also, I know Larry and I both serve as parliamentarians for various organizations, and that can be fun too because you're serving as an advisor, and just kind of keep things on track. So that's.
And one of the classes I teach is how to be a presiding officer. So I taught this class last quarter at Clatsop Community College, and what we do is we get people actually using the language of parliamentary procedure, because it's one thing to learn it, but it's another thing to actually utter the words like, it's been moved and seconded to do blah, blah, blah. And so you find that if you adhere to the procedures laid out in parliamentary rules, that your meetings are run better and everyone understands what's going on and there's no confusion, and your meeting does not end up in riots. And that's what we like.
Yes. Avoiding riots whenever possible. So many thanks to Jonah for joining us and for bringing this situation to our attention. It's always fun for us to advise. And thanks to John for our producer, and to Salem CCTV. We also want to ask folks to send to us any information about situations that have come up in your day-to-day life with neighborhood associations or homeowners association. You can go to parliamentarytalk.org to submit those to us, and that'll give us topics for future shows. So.
Yes, we would like to have your situation on the show. We love challenges. We would go through your bylaws and figure out what you do next and give you advice.
Yeah, all kinds of fun things that you can do. So.
Any final comments, John?
No, I think that was a fantastic show, you guys. There's a lot of people with questions just in general that you answered throughout the show, which is kind of the point. So thank you so much, and let everybody know that we will be doing this again in a month. And please go to youtube.com/uphillmedia to watch the archive of this. And remember to go to CCTV Studios and find all the programming we have there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.